Hello, and welcome to SportDataAPI. Today I'm going to walk you through and look at the API website, and then go through a little code and explain why I chose this API. So to begin with, it's Sport Data API, but it really only looks at soccer data. In the future, it's working on tennis and football, but right now all that it has is soccer. And I chose this API because myself, I'm a big soccer fan. I get up early on Saturdays and watch Arsenal. They're my team. But anyways, let's dive into the API. Scroll up to the top of the documentation, and we'll see that it talks about the authentication and how to get started. And so for this API, what you need is a key. And you get that key by just signing up. Very simple. You create an account, username and password, and then you choose your plan. I went with the free plan. They have other options if you're somebody that's seriously going to look at this data for a long time, month after month, year after year. But me and the purposes of this project, I'm just going to look at the free data, which costs nothing to sign up for. It's free. And how you do that is you click the developer portal link. And so I already have that open, so I'll take you there. And since I'm already signed in, I already have my API key. So all you need to do, create an account, go to this dashboard page where you go from the developer portal, and your API key will appear. And I've got no problem showing you guys this key because I can just rotate my key and it changes the key, refreshes it. So now we're going to go back to the documentation and see what we can do once we have that key. The first thing that we can look at is countries. The endpoint here will be soccer/countries, and as we'll see, all the endpoints begin with soccer. What comes after that is what you're actually going to do. And the parameter here is continent. So really, what you're going to look at is just, you can pick your continent, let's say Europe, because that's what they did in their example. And you'll just see all the countries in Europe that have a soccer league. And now we'll look at their demo response here. See the query, the continent's Europe. And then it just shows all the countries in Europe that have a soccer league. So we have Albania, Andorra, Armenia, and so on. And this country by ID, we'll see a lot of by IDs after each endpoint and parameter that we look at. The ID just essentially puts the parameter onto the end of the endpoint, which we are not going to do. So we're going to ignore those. Next, we have leagues. And we can see the country ID is a parameter and subscribed is also a parameter. So what happens when you sign up for your account is that you have the option to subscribe to leagues. And look at that right here. I've subscribed to 2 leagues because that's what I can do with my free subscription. But they have all the international leagues and then all the leagues for each country. Back to the documentation. We see that those are parameters, country ID and subscribed. What they looked at here is the country ID equal to 48, which they say is Germany. And we'll look at the demo response for leagues in Germany. And it lists all the leagues. We see Bundesliga, that's their main league. 2 Bundesliga, that's their second league. 3 Bundesliga is their third, and so on. And we scroll to the bottom, we see that they have the women's leagues down here. They have their Super Cup, which isn't really a league, but it is. And they also have junior leagues. So now we'll move on to seasons. So this endpoint is seasons, and it'll return a list of seasons for a specified league, and thus the parameter is league ID. So again, they're going to stick with Germany, and they're going to look at the Bundesliga, which the league ID is 314, so you see that on the end of the URL, league ID equal to 314. And we'll look at this again. And what it shows is that they've got 3 seasons in here, 2021, 1920, and 1819. And those are the 3 seasons that they have in the Bundesliga for their database. Next thing is stages, which we will not be looking at. Teams, however, we will look at. So this endpoint is teams, the parameter is country ID. What they're going to do again is keep Germany as their country ID, and then they're just going to look at all the teams that play in Germany. So you can see that this is a lot of data. And if you remember, we looked at all those leagues in Germany, and now just imagine all the teams that are within those leagues. Next, we're going to look at match status. And my favorite part about this one, which I think is really cool, is that this data is real time up to 99.9%. So give or take a few seconds or a few minutes, it's real time. So match status 1 means that the match is in play. We have all these other match statuses that you'll need to read the data, but then we get down to the match's endpoint, and we see the parameters. Season ID, live, status code, date from, date to. So we'll look at their example. They're going to look at the Bundesliga, and they're going to look at the 2021 season. Let's see what it looks like. See, we'll start with match 1. We'll see Union Berlin's playing Augsburg, and the score finished the final score of 1-3 for the away team. And so there's tons of games in here for the whole Bundesliga season. Next thing is players, which will have country ID, max age, and min age. And that'll basically just return all the players within a country up to an age, from an age, if you want to include that. League standings, something that we'll also look at. You just need a season ID, and it'll return the league table for that season. Top scorers, once again, season ID is the parameter for this endpoint, and you just plug in a certain season ID, and it'll return the top scorers for that season. Bookmakers will not look at, markets will not look at, odds we won't look at, venues we will not look at, and referees we will not look at, rounds we will not look at either. So now we're ready to get to the coding aspect of this. Scroll up to the top, and we'll see that we have our import statements at the top. We'll run those, just get that in there. We have our key, and again, you can hide this variable if you want, but as you saw earlier with this API, you can just rotate the key anytime that you want, and that'll reset it. That way other people can't use your key. And so we have our URL, our endpoint, which we're going to look at first is soccer/players. So we're going to look at players here. We're going to look at our country ID, which is equal to 48 for our parameters. And what that's going to do is we're going to look at players in Germany. And then we have our request.get, as .get is what's necessary to get from this website. That's how you get the data from this API. And so now we're just going to add it in here so that we can see what it looks like when we call it. You see it takes a little time to run. We're getting a lot of data here. And what we get a player ID, first name, last name, birthday, age, weight, height, an image if they have one, which would just be a URL link to the image. And then it says their country, and we know our country ID is 48, so we're going to have all German. And as we scroll down, we can see there's a ton of data here. So what do we want from this data? We're going to use a for loop and append a list to just get the age and player ID. Because for our purposes, what I'm going to do here is just make a histogram of the age for all the players from Germany. So we'll try and analyze that once we get it. Run that. We'll see the code runs fine. Run this again. We see that the Panda data frame, which I've then put the list, which we were appending, I put it into a Panda data frame, and then I sorted the values by the age. So we see the youngest player is 18 years old. We've got two 18-year-olds from Germany in this data set, and then the oldest is 39, still playing at that age. Good for him. What we're going to do then is look at a histogram of the age of the German-born players. We're going to use 21 bins as we have 39 minus 18. That'll give us a bin for each age. Run that again, and then we're going to look at it. We see that there's a big spike as we get into the mid to late 20s and early 30s. That's the player's prime for most players. That's after players who are 20 and 21 finally break into the professional ranks, unless you're really good and can play there at 18. And then we see a steady decline once we get into the older 30s for players that are retiring. What we're going to look at next, we're going to see if there's any live matches right now as I'm recording this. So our endpoint is going to be matches, and our parameter is we're going to see if the live equals true. See if there's any live matches right now. And we get an empty data back. So unfortunately, there are no live matches, but now that we've done that, we've completed our tutorial. We've made a histogram of the age of German-born players, and we've seen if there's any live matches. Thank you.